Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. And today we're going all the way up north to Canada
About Canada?
to talk about the new Canadian Prime Minister, Mark Carney. This is a really interesting story, and I know we've got a lot of listeners up in Canada, so this should be interesting to you guys.
Absolutely.
So, he comes from this world of finance. He was the head of the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England.
Yeah, so he was at the Bank of England during Brexit.
Yeah, during Brexit and the 2008, crash.
Right, he was heading up central banks during these global crises, basically.
Right, and now all of a sudden he's the Prime Minister of Canada.
It's such a fascinating trajectory.
Yeah, with no prior, experience in government.
Yeah, no political experience. He's never run for office before.
So this is really interesting. I mean, what does that tell us about the state of Canadian politics, that they're willing to go with someone who, is such an outsider?
Right. I mean, are we maybe seeing a global trend here where in times of uncertainty, people are looking for leaders who have maybe a different kind of experience?
Right, a fresh perspective.
Yeah, like maybe not from a traditional political background.
Someone who's a problem solver.
Right.
Not a politician,
Yeah, it's certainly something to think about.
Well, and especially, when we look at the sources, they really highlight the impact of Trump on Canadian politics.
Right.
And it's, front and center in this
Yeah.
whole thing. And Carney has even come out and made some pretty bold statements, about confronting Trump.
Really?
Saying Canada will win, especially when it comes to trade disputes.
Interesting. I wonder, is that posturing or is that like a genuine strategy?
Right.
Or is it both?
It's probably both.
Yeah, there's definitely a sense of defiance there, it seems like.
Yeah, definitely. And there's even this anecdote about former Prime Minister Jean Chrétien saying he had no idea what Trump's intentions were.
Oh, wow.
Which I think really highlights, the unpredictable nature of all this.
Yeah, it's got to be tough,
Yeah.
to walk into that kind of situation.
It must be so strange.
Yeah, like trying to play chess with someone who keeps changing the rules.
Exactly. So how's he going to do this right?
Well, he's got a lot of hurdles to overcome.
Yeah, so let's look at some of those, like first and foremost, obviously, U.S.-Canada relations.
Right, which are strained, to say the least.
Yeah, I mean, trade wars, sovereignty claims. I mean, how's he going to handle all that?
Yeah, it's a lot to deal with right off the bat.
Right, and then there's the whole internal political landscape. Is he going to call a snap election?
Oh, that's a good question.
I mean, can he unite the Liberal Party?
I mean, they were pretty much on the verge of collapse under Trudeau, right?
They were. It's like he's inheriting a fixer-upper,
Definitely a lot of work to do there.
big time. And then, of course, there's Pierre Poilievre, the leader of the Conservatives.
Right, you can't be overlooked.
This adds a whole other layer to it because he was seen as this rising star, with this populist style.
Yeah, and populism has kind of been a big thing lately.
But now it's like that might be working against him.
How so?
Well, I mean, his Canada First rhetoric, it just echoes Trump a little too closely now.
Oh, I see. Yeah, that's interesting.
Our sources even have a quote from him where he accuses the Liberals of trying to trick Canadians.
That does sound familiar.
Right, and then he even went on to say that they're pushing a Canada First agenda.
Oh, wow. So he's really leaning into that.
He is.
It's almost like a mirror image of what's happening in the U.S., but flipped.
It really is.
I wonder how this is all going to play out in Canadian politics.
Yeah, I mean, could this lead to like a shift away from populism in Canada because of Trump?
That's a fascinating question.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. We'll see.
I guess we'll have to wait and see how it all unfolds.
It'll be really interesting to watch.
Certainly will.
So what do you think are the biggest implications of all this?
Well, let's start with U.S.-Canada relations.
Okay.
I mean, it's a relationship that has historically been pretty smooth.
Mm-hmm.
But as you said, Trump's policies have really kind of, messed things up.
It's like having this neighbor who suddenly decides to build a fence right down the middle of your shared driveway.
Exactly. And not just any fence, a fence with tariffs and threats.
Exactly. And so Carney's walking into this diplomatic minefield.
And he's coming at it with a very different set of tools than his predecessors.
Yeah. I mean, he's a finance guy, not a diplomat.
Right. So is that going to translate?
Right. Can he outmaneuver Trump with economic strategies, or does this need a more, confrontational approach?
Well, and he has talked tough. He said Canada will win. Remember?
He has said that, but, actions speak louder than words,
That's for sure.
especially in politics.
Definitely.
And then he's got all this internal pressure, too. I mean, the Liberal Party was a mess under Trudeau.
Oh, yeah. They were deeply divided.
Right. So can he bring them together?
And can he restore public confidence in the party?
It's like inheriting a house that's been through a hurricane.
Right? You got to rebuild the foundation before you can even think about decorating.
Yeah. So he's got to figure out what Canada First actually means in this new context.
Right. What does that look like in terms of policy?
Yeah, trade deals, immigration social programs.
And how does it resonate with the Canadian public?
That's a big one. And then there's the possibility of a snap election.
Oh, yeah, he's got to decide about that.
Does he call one or risk being forced into it later?
It's a gamble either way.
It is. If he calls it too soon, he might not have time to, really get things in order. But if he waits too long...
The Conservatives could gain momentum.
Right, and Poilievre could capitalize on any lingering dissatisfaction.
Right.
And speaking of Poilievre, it seems like his populist approach might be backfiring on him.
How so?
Well, he built his career on attacking Trudeau's perceived weaknesses.
Right.
But now he's vulnerable to the same criticisms.
Because of his perceived alignment with Trump.
Exactly.
Interesting how things can change so quickly.
I know. And our sources even pointed out this quote from him where he said that the Liberals were, quote unquote, trying to trick Canadians.
Oh, wow. So he's really using that populist rhetoric.
He is.
It's like looking in a distorted mirror.
It really is.
His strategy, which once seemed so effective, now risks alienating the very voters he needs to win over. It's a stark reminder that political strategies that work in one context can totally backfire in another.
Totally. So to recap, we have Carney, the financial expert turned politician,
Right.
facing a diplomatic minefield thanks to Trump,
Right.
a divided party in desperate need of a makeover,
Right.
and a rival whose own populist playbook might be turning against him.
Wow, it's a fascinating situation.
It is. It's really complex.
It is, but what makes it even more intriguing is how all of this plays into Canada's role on the global stage.
You mean like how this potential shift in Canadian identity could impact their relationships with other countries?
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got this former central banker leading Canada, a country that's always been seen as like this stable and reliable player on the world stage.
Yeah, the good guys.
The good guys, yeah. So how does this change things?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And our sources point to some interesting possibilities, like Carney's deep knowledge of global finance.
Right.
Could give Canada a lot more leverage in international economic forums. We might see Canada taking the lead on new trade alliances.
Oh, interesting.
Or, maybe reshaping some existing ones.
So maybe Canada becomes this unexpected economic powerhouse.
Yeah.
Using its expertise to navigate this world that's like super uncertain right now.
Right.
It's like the quiet kid in class who suddenly, becomes valedictorian.
I like that.
Everyone's like, oh, wow, they had hidden talents all along.
Right.
And this shift goes beyond economics. I mean, Carney's victory, especially with, everything going on with Trump, it could really change how Canada sees its relationship with the U.S.
Yeah, there's this sense that Canada might need to define itself more forcefully.
Right, like assert its independence.
Yeah, create its own unique identity on the world stage.
It's like that moment when a teenager realizes they're not just a mini version of their parents,
Right.
They have their own dreams and goals.
Exactly. So what kind of ripple effects could we see from this?
Well, that's a good question. Our sources highlight a few things to watch, like how this impacts Canada's relationship with other nations, especially those who are also kind of, wary of U.S. policies.
All right.
We could see stronger ties with Europe, for example.
Yeah.
Or maybe more assertive approach in, international organizations like the UN or something.
Right. It's like Canada's stepping out of the shadow of its big brother and saying, hey, world, we have something to offer too.
Right. We're not just America's quiet neighbor anymore.
Exactly.
So what else should we be watching for?
Well, the impact on global trade is huge. Will Canada try to diversify its trading partners?
Right. Rely less on the U.S. market.
Yeah, exactly. And could Carney's financial expertise lead to new innovative trade agreements?
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, ones that other countries might want to copy.
So Canada becomes like this trendsetter in global commerce.
Yeah, showing other countries how to navigate this turbulent economic world.
Wow, that's a big shift.
It is. And then we have to consider the impact on Canadian domestic politics.
Right, of course.
Will Carney's leadership, with its focus on global engagement and financial stability, will that change the political discourse in Canada?
Will we see a more unified approach to national challenges?
Or will the divisions just continue?
Right. So it all comes back to that age-old question, can one person really change the course of a nation?
Right. Or are those forces of history just too powerful to overcome?
Yeah, it's a big question. And as usual in politics, the answer is complicated and it's going to take time to see how it all plays out.
Definitely. But what's clear from our sources is that Canada is at a crossroads,
They are.
and the decisions made now will have a big impact down the road.
So we started with this financial expert taking a leap into politics.
Right, quite a leap.
And now we're talking about a nation potentially redefining itself, on the world stage.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey.
It really has.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
let's talk about implications for Canada, domestically.
Okay, sure. Well, one thing our sources point to is this idea that Carney's leadership could usher in, a new era of political discourse in Canada.
Okay, how?
Well, he's coming in with this focus on financial stability,
Right.
global engagement.
Right, yeah.
So will we see, a more unified approach to national challenges?
Right. Will people kind of rally around those ideas?
Yeah, or will those old divisions, just keep lingering?
So it comes back to that question of, can one person really change the course of a nation?
Yeah, it's a big question.
It is. And I think, as usual in politics, the answer is complicated.
Definitely.
And we'll have to wait and see how it all plays out.
Exactly.
But it's clear from our sources that Canada's at a crossroads.
Right, they are.
And the choices they make now will have a big impact down the road.
Absolutely. And I think it's so interesting how all of this is playing out, with Trump in the background.
Yeah, I mean, talk about a complex situation.
Right. It's like he's this constant, unpredictable factor.
He is. And it seems like even though he's not directly involved, he's still casting a long shadow.
Yeah, he really is. And I think that brings us back to Poilievre.
Yep. Like the conservative leader.
Yeah. It's almost ironic how it seems like he was trying to ride this wave of populism to victory,
Right.
But now he might end up getting swept aside by those very same forces.
It's like the wave crashed on him.
Exactly. And it's a reminder that even the most, effective political strategies, they only work in the right context.
Right. The world's changing.
It is, and you have to adapt.
So what about Carney? Do you think he can rise to the occasion?
Well, he's definitely stepping onto a stage that's already set.
Yeah.
But the script is still being written.
Right. Will he be a transformative leader?
I guess only time will tell.
That's the big question.
Yeah, and it's a question that's facing a lot of countries right now.
Definitely. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the rise of Mark Carney and what it means for Canada, we've covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, we have.
But this is just the beginning of the story.
Right. The story's still unfolding.
It is. So keep watching Canada because things are about to get very interesting.
Definitely.
We'll be back soon with another deep dive. Until then, thanks for listening.